today for what promises to be a very powerful and a very meaningful and necessary conversation. Today, we are going to be centering and anchoring the invisible cost of disability. My name is Rosanna Rodrigues. I'm a social worker and a mental health professional, and I currently head the Mental Health at Work vertical of Equilibrio Advisory LLP. And I will be moderating. I have the privilege to moderate this conversation today. Now, while disability is often spoken about in terms of physical access, medical care, today we are here to go a little deeper. Right? We are really going to try and explore and unpack some of the less visible, less obvious, and less recognized aspects of disability, including allyship, and how that can show up and how that can be and become a place of trust and ownership, right? We are also going to be looking at some of the unspoken about, completely invisible aspects of financial, social, emotional, and systemic cost of disability, right? Which don't often feature into our conversations as allies. Uh, I think a lot of these conversations really showed up for us as a firm at Equilibrio Advisory through our flagship, program from the Inclusion at Work vertical, which is In This Together, where we really work to build supportive spaces for organizations, looking at gender, sexuality, disability, and caste. And one of our speakers last time spoke to us about the invisible cost of disability, and that's been a spotlight for us ever since. A spotlight that we really want to expand today with this wonderful panel of people that we have with us. I'm just, though none of you really require any introduction, just a quick line or two on each of you before we get started. So welcome Shomita. Shomita Basu is a solution seeker passionate about improving quality of life through design and systems thinking. She founded Zainika Inclusive Fashion, creating clothes for all body types and abilities. Her work has earned the UNDP Global Honeybee Award and Tata Social Enterprise Challenge recognition. With a background in journalism and social development, Shomita focuses on inclusion, gender, and equality. She has reimagined fairy tales with feminist, inclusive twists. I love that. Published by HarperCollins India. Shomita holds a master's in development studies from ISS The Hague and is a sought-after speaker on inclusion and design thinking. Welcome, Shomita. It's so wonderful to even read your brief bio. Welcome, and so glad to have you with us today. We also have Usri. I think you're on mute, Shomita. We didn't quite catch that.
I just said thank you, but yeah, that should have been the loudest thing and not on mute. Lovely to be here, and I'm glad that we're all together on this. Yeah.
Thanks, Shomita. Usri is our next panelist. Usri Basistha is a neurodivergent queer educator, queer affirmative counselor, writer, and artist for whom the intersection of queerness, disability rights, and specifically neurodivergence is a passion. I have the good fortune to also be able to work with Usri together since we are colleagues at Equilibrio. They are also a subject matter expert with lived experience, and they've been writing on all of these topics for over a decade. Usri, thank you for really being here today and being open to talk about all these things that you're passionate about, but also to anchor your lived experience. Just wanted to welcome you to the panel as well.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Rosanna. And as always, looking forward to having yet another insightful discussion on allyship and breaking boundaries and all of those things.
Yes, thank you so much, Usri. And last but definitely not least, Samriti Makkar Midha, the partner and co-founder of Equilibrio Advisory LLP, a psychologist with a specialization in clinical work, a queer affirmative psychotherapist with expertise in CBT and narrative therapy. Samriti is also a certified neurodiversity practitioner. And Smriti is going to be bringing two very interesting perspectives into today's conversation. Smriti is going to be bringing the perspective of the therapy space and what's really coming up from clients, within that therapy space when it comes to disability and access. But Smriti is also going to be bringing in her expertise working with various organizations across industries, across sectors, across modalities. That Smriti's been doing in the position of an external member for POSH as well as an advisor for developing inclusive policies and practices and sustainable ones at that for nearly a decade now as well. So welcome, Smriti. Going to give you also a few moments to chime in case I missed anything. There's so much to cover for each of you.
Thank you so much, Rosanna. And thank you, Usri and Somita, for this opportunity. It's lovely to be sharing this space with you and really looking forward to this discussion.
I just want to also mention that we also would have had Puneet Singh Singhal with us today, who is also a wonderful person and a disability rights activist, and has done so much to create visibility around disability rights and inclusion. Unfortunately, Puneet is unwell, and we are sending Puneet all our love and prayers and vibes to be healthy. Um, so over the next hour, what we are going to do is we are going to be talking about disability, really breaking down what disability looks like. Is it a single story? Is there more to it? We're going to explore that, explore genuine access, support, and inclusive policy and allyship, and how that may emerge in practice. Just before we begin, I want to let everyone who's tuned in to the conversation today know that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the comments and we will take it up through the course of today's conversation. Um, Okay, so with that, I think let us start with the first question, which I'm opening up to each of you today. So, when we speak about disability, there is a single story, a single image that comes to mind very often, right? Even in terms of how it is represented in various spaces. Um, you usually see just even when it's just about an icon, you usually get to see only locomotor disability represented. And the question that I really want to ask each of you today is the disabled community just that single story? Is there more to it? Is there diversity, and what does that diversity really look like? Kushi, would you like to start off, or Shomita?
I can go with it because I have a locomotor disability, and that icon for me is very interesting because it doesn't represent me, even within locomotor disability, right? Um, any part of your body can have the locomotor disability, but that literally shows that you're using a wheelchair, which means your waist down have a larger disability. Uh, and that's just one part of it. I'm talking about the simplest part. You may have a locomotor disability with your hands, and that doesn't come out. And also not the signage, but sometimes with like posters and all. I don't know why, but people think all of us in a wheelchair really aim to fly. So you will see people in a wheelchair, and then that, like, as the poster suggests that if you do this, or the empowerment process will help you fly. And I'm like, I don't want to fly. Like, so it doesn't represent us as much. And it's almost like you want to say, oh, if you can't walk you can fly. Who said that was supposed to be there? Who said flying can replace walking at any point? And that if I want to do it. So I think, yeah, you're right, it's not represented. So that's just one part, right? So I'm just saying, even when it's locomotor, it doesn't represent. It doesn't talk about the spectrum, doesn't do any of it. Then it doesn't talk about the other visible, invisible. Visible disabilities, like let's say someone blind, and you may be able to figure it out with their sticks that they use, or a certain other things. But though someone who's deaf, you wouldn't really know right away, unless maybe the ear aids are very, very visible. You wouldn't really know right away. So that's invisible. In your
Absolutely.
introduction, you said Usri will come forward with, like, her experiences and her understanding of neurodivergence. That's completely invisible.
Absolutely.
Uh, Now, within locomotor also, when we have a lot of chronic pain, it affects our mobility. But it may not be that visible. I may not be using a wheelchair and still have a lot of pain. So yeah, there's a large invisible disability as well, which is not even there.
Yeah. And still
Otherwise,
anchored
we are
in.
all in wheelchairs flying away. Yes, I don't know. I'm not sure where we are flying, but
Absolutely. And I think, Shomita, what you're also talking about is how is representation, right? Even in terms of any communication, posters, and
yeah,
I'm also linking Smriti to some of the things that we see, in workspaces, which are very well intentioned, but may not be bringing representation in a very uh, in a way that brings in resonance, for the community as well. Thank you for sharing that, Shomita. Shamita, I also want to ask about acquired disability, right? How does that really factor into these conversations when we are talking about, the community, or, just disability? What makes it different, or is it even different? I think Shomita is not here for right now. So, Ushi, may I ask you to come in and talk a little bit about neurodivergence and what makes neurodivergence even more complex because it is invisible?
Right. So, taking off from what Shomita was saying, the fact that disability is as much as a spectrum as now we understand the queer and trans umbrella to be a spectrum, right? We understand how the LGBTQIA movement is made of lot of different identities, and nobody's experience is homogeneous, nobody's experience is the same. Now we are just coming, and this understanding the pride flag, that rainbow has been there for decades now, but we are just coming up with the understanding of that spectrum of disability, that even disability has a lot of different parts to it, and then those spectrums have their own spectrums, just like the neurodivergent spectrum. We have just come up with a disability pride flag around 2019 by Anne McGill, and as you have it spotlighted behind you, Rosanna, on your background, the different colors stand for different things. Like the green represents sensory impairments, blue represents psychiatric impairments, then white we have for undiagnosed or non-visible or invisible disabilities, right? And so on and so forth. Red represents physical disabilities. So uh, it's just a vast spectrum, and not everybody's experiences are the same. Now when we come to the white part of it, where there are a lot of other chronic conditions also, like Shomita rightly spotlighted, like lupus, there's fibromyalgia. These are all genetic or chronic pain conditions, chronic fatigue, right? All of these are not apparent, or even for that matter, like Shomita spotlighted, deafness, not apparent on a first meeting. I have an aunt who is visually impaired, and people will compliment her eyes are the most beautiful part of her, not knowing that she has retinitis pigmentosa, which is like a genetic condition, and she is her vision is 80-90% impaired. So, with that understanding, now we come to neurodivergence, where this is sometimes it's not even visible to the neurodivergent person themselves. I have gone through this journey where I thought I was very like self-reflexive as a child, very self-reflective, and it took me a light bulb moment around 29 to understand, oh, okay, I have ADHD. I am a person with ADHD. And then 2 more years to come to that, even claim that space of, okay, I'm also autistic, because of the representation that has been of the autistic person. We grew up watching films like Rain Man, films like My Name is Khan, and we only saw a certain gender and a certain representation of autism, right? Which is again a vast spectrum. So all of these, things coexist together, and one cannot be spoken without the other. How even within invisible disabilities there is a sort of hierarchy, and there's a sort gender comes in, then things like whether you're high functioning or low functioning, on which Asperger's was based. Now it is an outdated concept, but basically Asperger's was based on that concept of high functioning autistic people, which I would have been probably labeled as if I had, I was like 20 years older and went for a diagnosis. So all of these things coexist and jostle for space together, because there is not enough awareness, there is not enough representation. So yes, that's what comes to mind.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ruchi. And I think what's also coming to mind is how do we. So, one thing is awareness on each of these conditions, concerns, experiences, and then an identification with that, right? Or what is really the impulse to say, no, 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 not me, because I don't look like what Rainmaker looked like. So, this can't possibly relate to me. And then how are we really, even when you use the terms high functioning and low functioning, I'm wondering what intentions are really in that, and how do we really look at it? Is it really about Because again, to me, it sounds like we're talking about productivity, functioning, capacity to do, produce, create. And I'm wondering whether, when we hold systems accountable, whether that conversation really shifts into what the support needs could look like to help people thrive, right? And what could that even language, the shift in that language, make possible? Because, like you said, years ago, when these terms were being used, like Asperger's, we were using high functioning, low functioning, but now we are talking about simple support and complex support, locating onus, not just within an individual or what that individual is capable of contributing towards, but rather what systems need to shift to create space for a person to thrive, right, and be the best version of themselves. I think that's standing out to me. But I also want Shomita, if this was one of the questions I asked earlier, if you could come in again and tell us a little more about acquired disability, because I think this is something that we don't often talk about or don't often even consider when we are, talking about building policies and practices that support people with disability.
Sure. Before I get to that, I just want to lay out something which I follow in my life almost as a ground rule. And it's something I've learned to follow, right? It's not something that I was kind of born with. I was not born with a lot of things, it seems. So, I agree with you, Rosanna, when you say we need to have the awareness and, we need to understand. But let's face it at a human level, right? We can't be aware of everything that's happening.
Absolutely.
At a human level, right? I mean, so I think what we can do, instead of trying to be aware of everything, know that we are not aware. Take that as the baseline.
Yeah.
And then start our conversation saying that this is who I am and this is what I know, but I don't want to assume it about whoever it is in front of me. So this is what I want to do it, how I do it, or how I would like to do it. But if it doesn't suit you, let me know. And let's come to a midpoint somewhere.
Absolutely.
I think that is very important also, because let's also understand things like ADHD or autism, Asperger's. And I have been in these groups because I have ADHD, so I am very closely connected to the community. And I often hear things like, oh, but a neurotypical will not understand this. Somebody who doesn't have this will not understand this, right? I have two questions out there. A friend of mine whose son has autism, he had once said, his wife had said that if you know a person with autism, you know a person with autism. You don't know autism. You don't understand autism. You know that one person with autism. If you know 10, then you know 10. All of them are different. And I think that's true for human beings in general, right? Like, why do we have to change that shift in our behavior when we're just conversing with another human being in front of me? And there are so many, let's say, neuro conditions, which probably is not even so-called labeled yet or categorized yet, studied enough. We don't have a name for it. Just the way we didn't have name for so many illnesses till very lately. I'm talking about chronic illnesses, right? So maybe that person also has a disability, is just not known to the world and to him or to us, So I feel like it's just so much easier if we stop trying to gain knowledge on everything. It's a good practice. Please go ahead with it if you really need to. But the step one is to know that you cannot know everything, is to ask and not assume. Things are pretty simple, actually. Not think, oh, are you a queer? What's your sexual orientation? What's your disability? What's your ability? You're a human being in front of me. This is what I come with. You are in front of me. I'm sure you come with something. And then how do we move in that space? I think if that is generally followed, and I answered this before the whole acquired disability thing, is that who cares if I've acquired one or not? If I was born with one or not? If I have a disability or not? I might just have a different philosophy in life, which you may not agree with. Does that mean if I'm not boxed in a disability or a LGBTQ, does that mean that I don't have the same amount of, let's say, empathy from you? So that's where I'm coming from. So I thought it's very important to lay that open, that no matter which box the person is in, that person is still a human being. Let's start with that. But yeah, I do have to answer your question about acquired disability, don't I? So, so yeah, what I feel like I have been very blessed to have, very fortunate to have experienced. I was a dancer since I was 2.5. Martial art. I got into martial arts in like early 20s. I'm a very physical. I still am. So my identity doesn't change just because my body has. So I'm a very physical person, which generally means I express through my body. I express through my art forms. I express through my karate. I heal through it, right? So when I acquired the disability, and that was also a gradual process, like one day I could stand and the next day I couldn't. The third day I could probably, not sit straight. The fourth day I could not do something else. So I have not just experienced the disability as a yes or no. I have experienced it as an entire spectrum. And luckily, because I started dancing and had a very doctors used to say, you have a super flexible body. Like apparently there's a medical term that says super flexible. I didn't know that. And so from a super flexible to a complete 100% pinned to bed experience, I think I was very lucky to have that, because that made me realize that I don't change even if my body does. And interestingly, people's perception of me keeps changing because of the body. So it's very interesting, because then they are not perceiving me, then they're perceiving my body. And that is when that thing that I said, that also they would just say, oh, maybe then you can't do this. Or sometimes people would just ask me things like, how do you spend your time? I mean, you must be bored to death. I said, I'm so busy getting better, I don't have the time to be bored. So, they don't understand the experience. And hence, if the same question was asked, like, I have never been so sick where I'm in bed 24/7 for as long as this period. How do you spend your time? What happens? What does your day look like? Right? So you ask me a question instead of assuming that I have a very boring, dull life. And interestingly, my friends who never bothered asking these questions, but we're just exchanging life, just any normal friends do. One of them once said, you being in one room seem to have a much more interesting life than I getting across 3 continents. She was constantly traveling between Europe, America, and India. So she's like, 3 continents in my life is not as interesting as yours. And she knows that because she bothered to hear me out. So yeah, I think it's a tough space to suddenly not be able to do the same things that you could do, like maybe a night before. I have had that experience also. Like in the evening, I could do it. I went to sleep. In the morning, I just couldn't do it. So I was like, hold on, what just happened? So now what do I do? Now how do I navigate that space? It takes time to understand what your accessibility needs are. And of course, to acknowledge that you have this problem, acknowledge that how long will it stay, accept how, is it a short term or a long term? And mine, because I have a chronic illness, which has led to the disability, it goes up and down. And there was a time I was frustrated about it. And then I thought, I like watching thriller movies. So God has just given me a thriller movie in my life to watch. So, okay, let's see what the thriller is the next day morning. So it's basically how you treat the situation, which again is not just about a disability. That's exactly what happens in life. If you treat your life as a interesting mystery to be solved, or just fun and curiosity that you need to unravel all the time, I think it's fun. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Shamita. I think it's a refreshing perspective, and some things that I've noted down. Some things you said. I don't change even if my body does, but perceptions change. I think that was very, very powerful. And I think a lot of what you've said today has really made me look at humanizing the space of allyship. The empathy that you brought up today, and even earlier when we were speaking, you mentioned trust and how important that is. And I feel those are basic things that as human beings we can offer each other. So what stops it? What changes when a label becomes apparent? And that's the question that I'm sitting with. And that's the question that I'm also going to extend to you, Smriti, because I think when you've been working in the space of allyship, spearheading conversations with people and organizations at various points in their allyship journeys, right? So, how do you really see these things showing up, and how do you see the understanding of disability evolve? Right?
Yeah. So I think first we need to understand what is the current understanding of disability, right, which was very beautifully unpacked by Shamit and Usri as well. And if I have to really, just summarize it quickly, because I was also sitting with those thoughts. One, it is by birth, it's congenital. Second, mostly physical and maybe locomotor disability using and if someone using is a wheelchair user, right? We're not looking even at the expanse of that of locomotor disabilities as well. Very defined, right, with finite needs. We are not really understanding that the needs could also be diverse and differ from day to day, as Shamita was also pointing out. Someone who's also very aware about their disability. That's something that Usri also pointed out, right? The fact that people may not be even aware as ND folks, as neurodivergent folks, as well, that maybe living with neurodivergence as well, right? So when you really look at this, is the understanding of disability that really stands even at the organization level, at the leadership level as well, which is a very limited understanding, very limited narrative, really flatten the complexity of all these diverse experiences that we're really talking about. And when you're really having conversation as allies, as advisors to organizations, the idea would be what is the understanding and how the understanding really needs to develop as well about disability. That if you also look at the act that we have in India, Rights of Person with Disability, they have also defined 21 forms of disability, similar to what Usri was really pointing out. From physical disabilities to sensory disabilities to across from communication, language, dyspraxia, all of those, right? That we talk about, including the acquired disabilities as well, like even acid attack victims. So the understanding would be to the leadership to really increase the awareness of it as well, and how some people may not be even have the vocabulary to talk about that there are these experiences. And so rather than we talking about what is your disability and what accommodations you need, we are now looking at also working with the language. What are your access needs, what are your support needs, because like you're saying, there has been a shift in language from high functioning to low functioning, to looking at maybe simple support needs to high support needs. So when you're looking at it, first increasing the awareness that disability is not finite, it cannot be always defined as well. We need to stay with the person's unique experience, like Shamita beautifully pointed out that one knowing about one person's experience with autism, you only know about that a person's experience with autism. Even that is also cannot really be put in a box. And as humans, we have a tendency to make meaning of everything, to put them into boxes, because that's how we process information, right? So I think that narrative really has to be broken completely. Then we really bring in terms of how do we then give autonomy and agency to the person with disability as well, by bringing them into the conversation. So many times when we're making policies at the leadership level, there is no one at the table with a disability. And even if we have, there is very limited representation. So yes, usually looking at able-bodied individuals, and then the conversation becomes how do we bring people with disabilities into the organization, so that again that fits into the idea of productivity, the hustle culture of how can we support them to get the work done, right? So again, there's again that narrative that needs to be shifted as well, because what productivity looks like for a person, for a neurodivergent person on one day could look very different on a fifth day. And we can certainly talk about those, and how we are also looking at now building energy conserving workflows. And when you start having these kind of conversation, how the workflow is right now that can conserve energy, you're not only helping people with disabilities or neurodivergent folks, we're also supporting able-bodied, high-functioning, neurotypical individuals. So if we have to put those labels there as well, right? And then again, we're really looking at talking about having conversations. So now there are a lot of these training sessions that are happening, including like disability etiquette trainings, of how do you even talk to people with disabilities as well, where you're not, like Shamita mentioned, you're not assuming things. If there is an interpreter in the room or translator in the room, so you're not looking at the interpreter, but you're looking at the person while you're having these conversations. So, and these, how you humanize these spaces becomes very, very important. And then you're looking at how do we building those ERGs because we may not know about people's experiences, and how are we creating space to understand each person's experiences, and then really having ERGs, employee resource groups, reverse mentoring. These are the spaces that we're really building on right now. And with the advent of AI, I think bringing AI as well is really supporting now to increase access using technology as well. But again, it comes at a cost. Like, we were trying to look at how do we bring this conversation, this space as well, making it more accessible. Either it was not available, or it was at a significant premium. So there's a cost attached to it as well. So again, then becomes a conversation of privilege, which are the organizations who have the budgets to incorporate access needs into the systems as well, and how it becomes a struggle for maybe startups or medium-sized organization. Then that gets parked off that later, because we do not have adequate representation right now, not realizing that we could have people who may not be aware, or they're masking, and as a result, they've not come out.
Absolutely, Smriti. I think so many things that you've brought up. You've talked about. You've really asked the question about when we talk about supportive policies, who's drafting them, what perspectives are drafting them. How do we draft disability policies to be supportive and inclusive if there are only able-bodied people or neurotypical people in those rooms drafting those policies? I think you're also something that, because I've been using the word to support people to thrive. And I think the question you got me thinking about is thrive towards what end? Because you were talking about hustle culture and you were talking about productivity. And are we really designing systems so that people can produce just as much as? Are we still looking at people only in terms of production? Which again dehumanizes a person, I think. We are looking only at workers then, not really human beings and the cognitive wealth and the vastness of experience and expertise and presence that they bring to the table. When we only look at things with regard to deadlines, timelines, and it is a hard negotiation sometimes because we are so conditioned to look at the world in a certain way. I think while you were also talking about the universal approach to design in certain spaces, that certain access needs actually support everyone else as well. It's just something that simplifies life so much. And I'm going to hold on to that thought because I think, Shomita, you may come in with that later. But you also spoke, Smriti, about just how many sort of barriers are completely invisible, and that's the crux of what we wanted to discuss. One being cost, right? And cost not just for an organization, and I know you spoke about it in that context, but also for a person with disability to navigate the day to day. What is that cost and what does it look like? And that's where I want to share something that Puneet had posted recently, which we found really, really resonate with us. So Puneet had said that praising resilience in disabled people often ignored, often ignores the exhaustion behind it. Strength is admirable, but everyone deserves moments of ease and vulnerability. Instead of just admiring their fight, the focus should be on creating a world where we don't have to fight so hard. And I think that spoke, that really sat with us for a long while. We turned it over and we felt like that speaks to the fact that barriers are so many, so all over the place, and the resilience that is often glorified. It's just a response to a very inaccessible world. So the question that I really wanted to ask Shomita, both you and Usri, to come in for right now is, what is the story behind resilience for disabled people when they navigate the world? And what are the systems that you think are absent that forces disabled people to be resilient?
I can talk for 3 hours on this, but I guess I should just take it to less than 2 minutes. Actually, I think I could talk for 30 days on this. But anyway, so how do I start? Okay, I think Puneet has brought a very, very important point. I will start with another post of mine that I probably sometime in the last 10, 15 days, I may have posted. I don't remember. But it says it's a little prayer where may I have the knowledge to know when to step out. May I have the wisdom to know that everybody is empowered. May I have the awareness to know when I am getting in their way. May I have the strength to step away when I'm getting in someone's way, right? I think a large part of our conversations, be it through organizations, individuals, NGOs, is about how do we empower the next individual in front of us. It's a very strong conversation when it comes to disability and for women. Me being a woman with disabilities, me being a woman who had experienced without being a woman without disabilities, I don't think I need to be empowered. I don't think you can empower me even if you wanted. I can empower myself. And the same goes for me. I don't think I can empower anyone on this planet because the other person can. What I can do is take the barriers away from that. What that I am creating. And what I am creating is, I'm creating probably, well, hopefully I am not doing it, but what happens is the barriers are like, oh, you're welcome, but I will not offer you a wheelchair accessibility. Not in a conscious way, but, as it so happens. Or the way we talk about, needing accommodation or needing more time, less time, functionality. Let's just, again, break the conversation and let's think of a writer. What do you pay the writer for? Very often not for the person's time. Very often you pay the writer for the chapter written, for the book written, for the article written. Because you really cannot put the value. So are you measuring the work in terms of hours, which is where industrialization had started? But now that we have shifted and all of us have evolved, not just those with disabilities, but all of us have evolved and we value the work that is being put in. Otherwise, somebody who's, let's say, a finance head of an organization putting in 8 hours should be paid almost the same way as a newbie doing the accounts and bookkeeping, right? But we don't do that. So we value the work. Then why do we not have conversations on, if I am bringing in this work, I get paid this, and end of this conversation. And for this, I need this work, or I don't need this work, etc., etc. The other thing that happens when we work in an organization is we forget that the SOPs should also have workflows. We forget that we don't just need accessibility in infrastructure, but also in our processes. And as an organization, no one individual should be only responsible for something. And that's, again, true for everyone. Do you know if you're going to fall sick tomorrow? You don't. I happen to just know it a little bit more than others, that, oh, I may fall sick tomorrow. I have a higher probability than you. That's the only difference, right? My probability is higher. But as an organization, your workflow, your systems, and your SOPs should have backup of a backup of a backup in everything that we do. And that doesn't mean we're having multiple layers. It just means having intelligent processes. That's where design thinking comes in. That's where system thinking comes in. That's where system designs are all about. So instead of spending a lot of our hours and efforts there, we suddenly try to retrofit some kind of accessibility requirement, which honestly doesn't speak to anyone. If I suddenly go and say, oh, by the way, I can only do this if I have a backup, then it's only thinking of a backup for me. But if a system itself has backups, you don't have to worry about it. Right? And like I'm saying, the system should have a backup. You should not have a system that has fires that needs to be, put off every now and then. An extremely able-bodied person can also be sick. Things happen. Life happens. So that's one thing. The other thing that I need to say is that a mind shift change is far more important than an infrastructural change. Or even I'm a very pro-language person. I'm very careful with the words that I use, and I also tend to hear what the other person is saying. Having said that, I have very often met people who've said, oh, you're differently able, especially able, words I really don't like. However, their intent is so right that I leaned on to that intent, and I knew that they're willing to make space for me, irrespective of the words that they are using. Whereas I have met people who have said, I'm a person with disabilities, which is the term that I prefer. So they have educated themselves, they are aware, they're saying the right things, but they just don't have the heart, or not enough. Okay. And so I think it's a mind shift change more than anything else. And because I tell you, where there have been even with me, there have been times when I said, oh my God, if I have to bring in that accessibility in whatever I'm doing right now, it'll be expensive for me. And then how do we do this? We just don't do it that way. Because we have the right in the right place, we don't use that software if that's not working. We use some other software. Just an example, right? We do something else, something that actually allows people to come in together without someone feeling left out. And that's the conversation that I need to have with the next person, where I say, don't assume. So just ask. So ask the person, like, by the way, this is what we are doing. The accessibility that you said that you need, this is not providing, or providing at a higher cost that I can afford. What else do you think we can do? Very often the person who has a problem usually has a solution. So that may be a very personalized solution. You may not be able to, generalize it. But if you're only working with one person, you just need that one solution. If you're working with 10 people of the same, then you need someone with an expertise to say, okay, that seems like a solution. Can it be generalized? Maybe with a small tweak, maybe not. So the sense of a budget or a cost is scary when two things happen. When you're not thinking about it from the very beginning, or I'm trying to retrofit it in some way, or when you are trying to push the current system to do something that it's not meant to do. So if the system doesn't work, one way is, try to change it, but otherwise just don't have it, chuck it off, bring something new. That's how new things are done. I have seen ramps, which means people have put a budget in there, people have added whatever is needed to be added, and now there is a ramp, mainly because there's also a law that says you need a ramp. Those ramps, I usually play this song that says, remember the staircase to heaven, or stairways to heaven? Well, this is not a stairway, this is like a ramp to heaven, because there's no way, even with help, forget independent wheeling, even with help, you cannot wheel it without having your heart do some real heartbeat out there, okay? It's just not accessible. So just having the infrastructure is not enough. So my thing is, you spent money, you spent people, you spent resources, you just did not spend thoughts in it. You did not have someone thoughtfully design it. Because you did not care about how to use it. You cared about checking it off the requirement of the law. Yeah. So it's a very complex thing. Like I said, I can speak for 30 days on it, which I shouldn't right now. But you get the flavor of what I'm saying. In my experience, budgets are hardly ever a concern. I mean, it's a concern, but it's never a problem. And one can work around the budget. That's what entrepreneurship is about. That's what building things are about. That's what being creative is about. What creativity cannot do is that it cannot give you a heart. It cannot make you thoughtful. That's something you can work on by yourself and get there. Yeah.
Thank you, Shomita. I think, again, I'm seeing ways to humanize these conversations, really getting a spotlight in what you're saying. Okay, so right now we don't have the budget for this, but what else can we do? How many of us, as leaders, decision makers, have that thought process, or is it just a rejection at that point of time, right? Are we truly committed to the cause of building inclusive spaces and being able to innovate or think creatively about solutions together, right? We are in it together. I think
give you one example? I'm sorry. Yeah. If maybe that will help. I'll try and keep it short. In my brand Zynica, where we are about creating inclusive and adaptive fashion, given that we are a small organization right now growing, it is almost impossible for us to feed into every possible adaptation and inclusion as inclusive garments as is required. So as a decision, we only have kept the line for a few products, a few SKUs that are there. However, going against many of the opinion and suggestions and advice of those who are experts in the industry. I am a newbie in the industry, right? I shifted and took to this because of my lived experience. So a lot of people said, okay, that's it, do this, build up, and then you think of the next one. While I am doing that, I have made sure I keep an opportunity for people who reach out to me, and only those who reach out to me, through our DMs, through our calls, emails, that, this is my need. What do you think I should buy from you? I said, okay, you know what? Unfortunately, nothing. But what I can do is, if it's really your need, I can make something only for you. I'll do that bespoke one customized wear. I'll not charge you heaven amazing amounts for it, because it's your need. You want something, and I'm not able to provide it. So, as a value proposition, I will always should be able to provide you with something, and which will be, which should be at least in the price range that my brand generally provides things.
Hmm.
And uh, we work with that. Is it convenient for me? No, it's not. But is it something that makes me happy? Of course it is. It stands to my value system. It stands to our organizational value. It is not something that I can do at a scale right now. And
Hmm.
the thing about business is, if you want to do everything at a scale, you will be able to do nothing. So I might as well do some things at scale, help a large number of people where that particular thing is helpful at scale that I am doing. And for others, I have a small part where I can play, and I do that. Maybe a big organization will call it CSR. I'm neither big and nor do I intend to call it a CSR. It's not my social responsibility. It is who we are as an organization. So
Hmm.
I'm saying there are creative ways of doing things.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Shamita. I think it's so important to see what the path looks like, what the journey is looking like for people who are holding on to these commitments and values, because I think it sparks of creatively thinking out of the box for so many other entrepreneurs or decision makers or leaders, right? Because I think sometimes you just think of what you know or what you keep hearing all the time, and it's so important to have perspectives and stories like this come in. So thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that as
that's
well.
the job role, yeah, Rosanna. That's the job role of the C-suite.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
know.
they're supposed to be doing.
And I think this is a good lesson, and this is a good reminder to really look at where values have really fit in one's commitment to certain goals as an organization. And more so, I think, as an individual on a human level, and how we are really taking on those commitments and values as we go along the day to day. Smriti, I feel like this would be a great segue for you to come in. But before you do, I really want to give Usri some space to come in and also talk about what barriers could look like. So we've really looked at the systemic and structural barriers, and Shamita's taken us through what that could look like for organizations and at a very macro level. So, Usri, is there anything that you'd like to also share from a more personal, very hidden cost, perspective when we talk about disability as for anchoring neurodivergence?
Yeah, so taking it back to that understanding around neurodivergence, right, and resilience. Uh, a quote that is, I am not sure, but it is attributed to Einstein a lot, Albert Einstein. So the quote goes, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So when I
Hmm.
read this quote, and I have come across this quote earlier also, but from, I think it was in a neurodivergent article around the time I was 28. I read it and I was like, something clicked in my head, and I had still not come to that space of aha moment. Okay, this is my, I'm a neurodivergent person, because even j- claiming that space, there are a lot of barriers before that. To go very briefly into my own lived experience, so that isolation that stays from being neurodivergent and trying really hard to fit in, but knowing somewhere that something's a little off with me. So the script starts with, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be like my friends? And okay, why is my parent taking me to a counselor at age 14 when my friends are not going, my friends are playing, but I am being taken? So there was that recognition also uh, in my family, but the support was not there because it was coming from a space of stigma. It was coming from a space of hiding it and nipping it in the bud. Nipping what in the bud? Nipping my personality in the bud, nipping who I am in the bud. So it begins with very early on and has a lot of stigma attached to it. In education spaces, like I was a literature major, sorry, literature honors and then masters. But then when I was going into theory and everything, I was finding it very difficult as an ADHD person to sort of stay abreast of my curriculum. I had this really helpful community of friends who would literally call me and make me mug my notes the night before my exam. That was my support system. Now I realize that was my accommodation, because as an ADHD person, it was really hard for me. And yet I was a golden child when I was a child, younger, and I was academically gifted. But because the systems were not being able to keep up with my neurodivergence, I was the one who was feeling like a fish out of water, right? Again, that whole thing of being a fish but being assessed by my ability to climb a tree. And I thought the problem lay with me. And even when I went to the professional space, when I started out as a journalist, though I loved it, though I loved writing on intersections of gender and disability. I remember going to the first international film festival of persons with disability that started in 2015 in India. That was the first iteration of it. But coming back to the newsroom, that was first of all very male dominated, and also very like loud, very like there was this understanding of a certain lifestyle. You smoke, you drink, that are coping mechanisms that are normalized, right? But normalizing like coping mechanisms for what, right? Because there's this underlying stress that nobody really speaks to. So this uh, newsroom, that a friend of mine said that the newsroom took me, chewed me, and spat me out. But then that person also later realized that he was also a neurodivergent person. So we did not, growing up in educational spaces, in professional spaces, then in therapy spaces, there was a lot of stereotyping, a lot of, oh, you're bipolar, you're borderline. As queer people, as uh, people with ADHD, it's the overlap between bipolar, and as a female bodied person, the overlap between bipolar and borderline is so, and ADHD is so common. People are so often misdiagnosed, and it happened with me too. It's so easy to take a female bodied person who is complaining about something and say hysterical, bipolar, borderline, end of story. And again, the stigma that comes around those identities. So these were all the inaccessible spaces that I grew up with, and that internal script, something's wrong with you need to change, you need to fit the culture, instead of thinking like Shomita, where the culture needs to not retrofit me into it, but expand and break itself down if need be, to reimagine it, where fishes don't have to come out of the ocean to climb a tree. Why can't fishes just stay in the water, and you make systems where there are systems where that communication between the tree and the water can happen. So yeah, that's what's coming up for me at this point.
Thank you,
Can I
Usri. I think,
please just say
please,
something? Because
please.
every time Usri was talking, I was like, oh my God, that's my story too. Being a person with ADHD, and of course, understanding that I have it at a much later stage in my late 30s, I think that's when I figured it out. And first and foremost, I'm not against labels, because I think labels help us in doing certain things. What I'm against is being obsessed with labels. So if you look at the Gita constantly says, everything is good, just don't be attached to it and don't be obsessed about it. So I feel like we can take a leaf from there and learn from there. But I wanted to come in here also because, for example, she said, the newsroom was not something that was a happy space for her. I started as a journalist as well, and I was a producer on a television newsroom. I love the space. That's where I thrive. That's where I feel like this is me. Okay. And I almost recreated in most of my things. I mean, if I don't have a deadline, I almost cannot function. So now think of being a self-employed or freelancer or an entrepreneur who's starting off. You're like, okay, give yourself a deadline. We can hardly trick our minds. If I give myself a deadline, that does not have the same value as something else happening. But I think the difference is that probably I don't have autism along with ADHD. That is maybe. And the other thing is, she with ADHD, me with ADHD may not be the same thing. We are different at the end of the day, and that's why while labels are good, let's not be obsessed with it. Another friend of mine was also diagnosed in his, I think, mid-40s or something. And he's in the UK, so the entire medical system there was like, we'll have to give you medicine, we'll have to give you medicine. Now, he is a senior rocket scientist, very successful. I think I do pretty nice. I'm happy with my life too, right? I'm without medication. And when he was being forced to take it, he, of course, given his brains, he decided he going to read everything about it. He said, I have a feeling this will not allow me to do the job that I'm doing. And then when we connected, he said, Shamita, you and I both can do what we do. And we get appreciated for the parts that we do so well and so differently is because we have that ADHD. Not in spite of it, but because of it. Now, having said that, I'm not going to say this is a disability or not. This is not my problem to solve. Somebody else should figure out if it's a disability or not. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe it is for someone else. But to always think that something is a missing thing, that something is a problem, I think that language and that narrative, like Usri said, I'm supposed to be a fish, I'm supposed to be in water. You have taken me to the tree. How is that my problem? Right? In my career, I have worked with a lot of writers, as you can imagine. I've worked with a lot of journalists. I've worked with a lot of researchers, and I've worked with a lot of designers. None of them work typically. I don't think even 1% of them are diagnosed, or they want to be diagnosed, or probably they don't even need to be diagnosed. But they do their jobs as well as they do. Because they are different. And I'm just saying different. I'm not saying what they have because I don't know. They don't know. And they have worked better in places where they have been able to thrive. One of my colleagues is always, whenever she looks up for jobs, and she's like, oh my God, you have such like short-term associations, 1 year, 1.5 years. You don't have a commitment. You have a commitment problem. And she's like, how is that your problem? If I'm looking for a project, if I'm a long-term, short-term commitment, what is your problem? And second of all, she very interestingly shows it on her CV, which says, there is a 4 years I've spent in one place. So that shows I'm not the problem. I can spend my 4 years. You have to create the space where I've spent my 4 years. I'm not going to give it to you because I tried to fit myself into something. They allowed me to thrive. I thrived. I was happy. I was there. Who wants to search for a job all the time? Yes, it's a unpaid occupation, right? When you're looking for a job, sitting for interviews and all of that. So I think I wanted to come in because whatever she said was almost like, oh my God, this is so close to my heart. Don't always have to problematize something. Just look at it as something that's not working, which is not necessarily a big problem. It happens between friends. I like Chinese, you like biryani. What do we eat tonight? It's not a problem, right? It's just something. It's a conversation, and work around it.
Thank you for that, Shamita. I think I'm really struck by one of the things that you said, what makes me good at what I do. It's not despite my ADHD, it's because of it, perhaps, right? And I think when we problematize and try to box things, try to define the label and create very defined borders, we lose out on all of these nuances, and that becomes a trap. Thank you for expanding on that. And Smriti, I really want to come to you to talk about, how does this really translate to workplaces? What are these systems? Because I think both Shamita and Usri have talked about certain practices, certain systems that just help the fish to thrive in an environment that is perfect for the fish to be a fish. So how does that really translate into organizations and policies where everything is, people try to make it very clearly defined, right? If A, then B, A plus B is C. So when it is such a structured approach, what do you think we need to keep in mind as allies?
I think Shamita has beautifully touched on those things, so I'm going to really maybe take it from there. It also stands in terms of the perspective that you're taking, the position that we're taking. Are we putting the onus on the individual or on the system? Like the example Shamita also shared right now, that there have been spaces where this person was there for 4 years because the systems were created for them to be part of the system and also thrive in the system as well. So what is the tonality of the conversation right now, right? That's one. Second, we're also looking at the intention. Are we really, why do we need diversity in our organization? Because it's a good thing to do. It's a mere checklist. It's a compliance requirement under different acts as well, because we really believe that it's a good business proposition. It's not a charity proposition as well, right? So what is the intent? And how important is this for us? Is it a negotiable value for us? It's a non-negotiable right now. Because like Shamita also mentioned a few minutes ago, right now, if it's not working, you need to maybe look at alternatives. We don't have to try and make the system work. And I think it's very important to know when we need to walk away from the systems that are not working right now. So I think coming back to the intention, then the value as well. And it's a business proposition, not a charity proposition. We're not doing anyone a favor here. Yeah, we're really building these systems because when there's more diversity, we are enhancing our cognitive wealth, right? Which means that we are going to, what the end goal is of productivity, it's not going to have the script that we've always known. The script could look very, very different. And we will do whatever it takes to make that possible as well, which also means to have constant feedback systems into place as well, by having voices from that diverse set of population. I'm not going to even talk people with disabilities right now, because we are understanding that we are working with individuals, humans, and each person is very different. Each neurotypical person is different from another neurotypical person. Each neurodivergent person is different from a different neurodivergent person as well. And how are we then really creating that space? And again, looking at like a feedback system, like the example of ramps, right? That I have a ramp, but is that ramp working for me? Is the ramp working for a wheelchair user as well or not? Right? And how are we, what are some of the criteria that we have in place, and what are the feedback telling us? Right? And who becomes responsible and the custodian of it? And which also means that are we creating psychologically safe workspaces? That if it's not working, can I, as a newbie as well, as a new entrant in the organization, or maybe a a lone person with not very loud voice, do I really have the space to articulate it with no fear of being belittled, ridiculed, or having to face any kind of consequences? Because as a human, if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy also, what is my need after the physical needs? It's the need to belong, need to fit in. We are having this conversation about in workspaces because there's a need to fit in as well right now. But does it also come at a cost? That I should just be grateful because I have been inducted into this organization. The fact that I've got an opportunity when I was denied and discriminated against at other organizations. So even if the ramp is not working, for example, right now, I should be grateful that there is at least a ramp. Grateful that they recognize there's a need for a ramp as well. Because then that is tokenistic. We are just doing what is required to be done, but not with the intention to really integrate the person without feeling like they are a liability. And I think that shift really needs to happen in terms of that gratitude does not need to come at a cost. They should not really look at their real liability in the organization as well. And then that can only happen through the conversation that we're really having right now, where people do not have to be invited in, but the fact that they already have a seat at the table. And there is a sense of belongingness, that they say that this is my workspace. It's up to me to make that I am going to come in together with the system as well, but the system has to support me. The onus should not be on me right now. How does the system support me to have that voice in the organization? And what are we then really doing? What are the leaders doing? What are the infrastructure telling us as well? And it could be in everything, right? For example, if you're looking at diversity or in people with disabilities as well, who are the population that we're really looking at? Are we looking at locomotor disability, wheelchair users, visual impairment, auditory impairment as well, mental health concerns, someone living schizophrenia, bipolar, dyspraxia? Who are we really looking at? And then how are we building policies and infrastructure? Because when we work with the organization, we look at how exclusion happens at a systemic level. It's not coming from the intent, but the systems don't support us, right? So how then we really make these dents across the employee life cycle, across the systems as well? And I think that's a big conversation to really be had, because it's so layered, so nuanced as well, that we really can't unpack the gravity of each layer in few seconds. But if there's any follow-up question, we'd be happy to respond to that.
Yeah. Shamita, did you want to respond? Because I noticed you have unmuted. Do you want to add on a little bit?
No, I think that was just unmuted. I mean, like I said, I can keep going because the experience, it's a lived experience, right? It's like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. And, but I think one thing I want to say, again, through a personal story, is that I write, right? So if people expect me to type as well, which I used to, and I still do sometimes. So, but when I can't, because my hands are most affected parts of my body. in terms of the locomotor disability and the pain associated, etc., etc. So everyone not only assumes, but they start telling me as if I don't know which world they live in. They think I haven't explored a speech to text. It doesn't work for me. And then they think, no, nowadays they get dialects. I said, that's not the problem. I am writing something so creative. If I hear my voice constantly, I don't know the next sentence I'm writing. It's just the process of writing. You can do that if you are probably writing something not as creative. I sometimes take really a long, even with a extremely high speed typing that I used to do before the disability, and I could type almost at the speed of somebody speaking, my brain would be faster than my hand and I would have time catching up. Now imagine me speaking and waiting for the computer to turn into words, right? It doesn't work. And having said that, I've said that to people also, if tomorrow I lose a little bit of the skill that I have with my hands, if I lose that as well, I will probably do what you're asking me to do, because that will be my only choice. But that's not my choice right now. And I don't need to know that thing exists, because I know that assumption that you think I haven't explored it. It's a little strange, because you're expecting a lot of high-end things from me. This falls a part of my skill set to have figured this out. And I request everyone who believes in having an inclusive workspace to do a few things. Stop advertising your positions that say we are looking for people with locomotor disabilities, and then credentials would be good. You're not really looking for a person with locomotor disability. This is not a skill that I want to sell, unless this is something that particularly helps. Like if you want to hire me for testing some kind of an accessibility need, fair enough. That's exactly what you need. But because you think that particular job space that you have, and to fill in your diversity quota, you think that can be done with somebody with, who is deaf. So now you're now looking for everybody who's deaf. Makes no sense. And that's insulting. It's dehumanizing. It's insulting. What you should ideally do is say, okay, we are looking for whatever. Who do you want to look for, Smriti? Give me a name. Give me a role. You want to look for an EA, executive assistant for yourself. Okay, let's start there. So Smriti's ad should be the role, executive assistant. Next, skills, whatever she needs. Qualification, bachelor's, master's, whatever it is that she thinks is required. And then in bold, underlined, we are a diversity, we believe in diversity. We are open, and we would love to work with people with any kind of gender, LGBTQ community, disability, etc. And we will work with that. Let's understand something. If I don't want to be an EA, and if I don't think I have the skills that she has listed out, I will not apply. So even if I am deaf, and I think that I can do that job because of the skills listed, I will apply. It's the same way that you would hire anyone else. You don't really need to tell me if I should have a locomotor disability or a hearing disability. That is like, I'm sorry, but that's stupid. I really tried to figure out a better word for it, but it's just stupid, okay? And the other thing that I have heard over and over again, and I have experienced, remember, both sides of the coin. Before my disability, people will ask me, what is it that you want to do? What's your ambition for the whatever, 5 years, 10 years? I never had them. Then I bluffed my way through those, because who knows 5 years? I hardly know the next 5 days. Yeah, you're asking a 25-year-old what the next 10 years look like? Are you crazy? I don't even know who I will marry. That changes things, right? No, not only for a woman, for a man too. Or for anyone in the gender spectrum. I know of only 5 genders. I don't know if there are more. So given all of that, then people started asking me, post my disability, what is it that you can do? I can eat. I can talk. I can type. Is that the right question? Will that help you with hiring me? And will you ask the same question to someone else without a disability? That's a stupid question. The question is, again, the same as the others. What is it that you want to do? And please don't do it for that stretch of 10 years. Nobody knows. So, what is your ambition? Do you like being an assistant? Do you like being the founder's office? Then yeah, do it. So those questions that you ask, and this is not a language problem, this is an intention problem. This is where you think the other person lacks something and you have to do something to the other person, for the other person. And that brings me to the last point. To all organizations, don't ask people what accommodations they need. Ask how you need to change yourself to be able to get the advantage of having people like me, Usri, Smriti, Rosanna on board. Because you are paying me not for my disability, you're paying me for something that I'm going to do for you. And that should be of value to you. To get that value on board, what is it that you need to do? So when you ask me what accommodation I need, it's almost like it's my problem. And it's
Absolutely.
not. And it's almost like you're doing something special for me. You're not. You're doing something special for yourself so that you can get the skills I bring in, you can get the ideas that I bring in, you can get Usri on board, you can get Smriti on board. I know Smriti has said she's an ally, but that's the whole point. We are not that different. I don't know if she has caregiving, at home or not. Why do we need to, and why do we need to know so much? That's my other question. Why do we need to ask women even today, will you get married? Do you have children? Will you have children? Do you have parents? Are they sick? Are you sick? Why are you wasting your time? Just see what you can do to get my best on the table. If I sounded very excited about it, that's because I am. So yes.
Thank you, Shomita. I don't think I need to summarize. I think you've very articulately summarized our entire conversation. We are a little over time, so I'm going to quickly close. I just want to thank each of you for bringing your perspectives to the table boldly, courageously, and without restraint. Loved being part of this conversation and hearing from each of you. And I think my biggest takeaway is to humanize this space, right? There is no us and them. We are in this together, and it is about the cognitive wealth that we each bring to the space. It's not about what someone else can do to empower a person, regardless of if they have disability, caregiving needs, or any other aspect of marginalization. It's really what are they bringing to the table in terms of diversity, unique life experiences, creative thinking, innovation, uh, you know, and more. People will surprise you. So I think I'm going to end today's conversation spotlighting what Shomita, you, Smriti, and Ushi have said. Can we bring in empathy and curiosity into these spaces, these processes, these systems, and these conversations going forward? To all of you who've tuned in today, I really hope that intention and thought can stay with you, uh, you know, longer than Disability Pride Month for sure. And stay tuned to this space to keep getting updates and resources that will help you anchor these intentions. So thank you, everyone. Here's us signing off. Thank you, Shomita, Ushri, and Smriti, one more time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.